Afternoon, everybody. I welcome all the delegates, speakers, and Dr. Shirish, my friend, and Dr. Preeti in this webinar of quality control, microbiology challenges, and what are the best practices. Let me introduce my dear friend, Dr. Preeti. Dr. Preeti basically is a very dear friend. Dr. Preeti Bajaj is head and professor of Department of Pathology, Dr. Vasantrao Pawar Medical College in Nashik. She has co-authored textbooks, has many publications to her credit. She's very passionate about histopathology, cytopathology, teaching students, and also a very enthusiastic, a committee or maybe a team member. So over to you, Dr. Preeti. All the very best for this webinar, which we have started after a gap of 6 months. Thank you, Santvana and Zubair for getting this happen. And yes, thank you, Preeta, Dr. Sakshi, and without yes and all, thank you, Lalu Madam and Vijay Sir, for giving us this opportunity. Over to you, Dr. Preeti.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Aparna, for the kind introduction. I welcome you all to this webinar, and really I'm happy that again we are back on track. The CAHO team is back on track, and we'll be having monthly webinars from now on, which will be of benefit to all our community, especially the diagnostic physicians, I must say. So today I take great pride in introducing Dr. Shirish Malvankar. He is a medical microbiologist with 24 years experience in diagnostics industry. He has done his UG and PG education both from Topiwala Nair Medical College, Mumbai. He is founder and director of Lotus Biologics, an exclusive and renowned microbiology lab, and is also the chief mentor Medical Affairs Rivara Labs Private Limited. He is the founder, member, and chairperson of Society of Clinical Microbiologists and has been NABL assessor since 2006 and lead NABL assessor since 2012. And he was earlier associated with SRL Diagnostics and other reputed diagnostic centers. So let's hear about quality control in microbiology, challenges and best practices from the best person who's, like what I said, has been lead NABL assessor also, is his experiences, and really want to hear from you your knowledge about this subject. So over to Dr. Shirish now.
Okay, so good afternoon everyone once again, and thank you for taking your time and joining us for this seminar late in the afternoon, and I'm sure most of you must be on your way home while logging in, or maybe towards the end of your office day. But thanks once again. And the topic that I'll be speaking on today is quality control in microbiology, and I would touch upon lightly on serology and molecular markers as well. And while we are discussing this particular topic on quality control in microbiology, I was wondering about what kind of people, what kind of audience I would be addressing today. And I'm sure many of you who have logged in to know more about QC in microbiology, with the ultimate goal that to take your lab towards an NABL accreditation in microbiology. Yes, ISO 15189 2002 guideline, 2022 guidelines. That's your ultimate goal, but you don't know where to begin. And I would categorize, or I would assume that the audience would be of two types here. Few who have just about embarked on the path towards accreditation, and who wouldn't know, some would be wondering whether what is certification versus accreditation. Are they the same? Which one is better? What should I go for? And there would be some who have already come from accredited laboratories where other lab departments are accredited but find microbiology as a daunting task. They have an existing QMS but don't know where to start for microbiology. I assume that these are the two types of audience I might be catering to today. So just to touch upon briefly before we get into the topic proper is what is certification. Certification is a product, a process, or a service of an organization that conforms to a specified norm. NABH incidentally offers a certification for laboratories, which is called the NABH MLP, Medical Lab Program. The NABL entry-level certification, however, does not cover microbiology. It covers hemat, clinical path, and biochemistry, but not microbiology. And accreditation is a formal recognition that a body, a laboratory, or a person is competent to carry out specific tasks, that it assures the client that the procedures and the test results are technically valid. It recognizes the technical competence of the laboratory staff. That means it's an extensive audit where not just your documentation, but also your processes as well as people will get audited. So coming to the topic proper, QAQC in microbiology, and whenever you embark on this process of QAQC, I would, just to put it in a perspective, there are certain questions you should be asking yourself before you, put your lab onto the route of accreditation. So let's ask the right question. Does my lab have the right infrastructure or resources? That is, infrastructure and resources as in people, the facility, the equipment. Does my lab follow the right processes? Right processes as in the pre-analytical processes, the analytical processes, quality assurance processes, and the post-analytical processes. And finally, does the laboratory report these results appropriately? Is the report format correct? Does it convey all the information? The release of who is authorized to release the reports? And finally, what kind of laboratory software that can be that is used for this process. So let's tackle one question at a time. Laboratory, does my lab has the right resources? Here we are talking about personnel. We're talking about whether the personnel are qualified enough, are they trained enough, and are they competent enough to execute the test under the scope of testing. It also deals with premises, whether the lab facilities, the administrative facilities, the staff, and the patient facilities are they adequate, safe, and appropriate. Whether the laboratory has enough equipment, reagents, and consumables. Are the equipment validated, calibrated, whether the preventive maintenance have been done on time, and in case of breakdown, what are the contingency plans. It also talks about the reagent validation, how they are validated, stored, how is the inventory managed, and what kind of lot verification done. Whether the lab follows the right processes, pre-analytical processes, as in the right instructions, whether these are given to the patient, whether the samples are accompanied by an adequately filled up test request forms. How is the collection of the sample done in adequate containers? How is it transported? Does it maintain the specimen integrity on its way to the laboratory? In the laboratory, whether the sample at its accession point, whether it is accepted basis any visible signs of damage to the sample. If the sample is hemolyzed or otherwise, would it be rejected at this point of time and you would ask for a repeat sample? The analytical processes should have all SOPs for all the processes. All the processes will be validated. There will be verification of these processes, and appropriate reference ranges should be available for all the tests. Moving on to quality assurance of processes, whether the right IQC is being used, whether all the tests under scope are under the external quality assurance program or the interlaboratory comparison program, Post-analytical processes, as in result review and approval, what is the process, who does it, and how do you store and dispose of the samples. Whether the laboratory reports its findings correctly, whether the report formats are correct, does it have all the attributes as mentioned in the ISO guideline, whether the content is correct, whether there are relevant comments on the report being released out by qualified people, whether any verbal or critical callouts are made, whether if it's an HIV case, HIV patient, whether post-test counseling has been done or not. If interim reports are released, are they followed up with a final report? And the audit trail and result recall policies, whether they are in place. The laboratory software, what is the structure of the software? Who has the access rights to enter or release reports from the software? What kind of archival and data backup facility is available on the software? So while I was constructing my talk today, I thought of how boring it would be if I go on and on about the way QC has to be done, and I thought I would just change the way I present this lecture today. And I thought of drawing upon my close to 20 years of experience with NABL and also as an auditee, because all my wherever I've worked, they have been NABL accredited laboratories, and so both my experience as an auditee as well as an auditor, I thought I would just draw from them, put up some common non-conformances as case studies, and we could discuss on that. That would make it a little more interesting than going on a drab lecture of QC at late in the day. Personnel requirements, and one of the most common non-conformance that we see is an MD pathologist reporting on sensitivity reports. And if you go back to the Act 2018, and which is recently been amended in 2020 as well, the laboratories have been classified as basic composite, medium, and advanced. Microbiology and infectious serology fall under the medium category of laboratories, whereas molecular biology falls under the advanced category of laboratory. And for both these, the authorized signatory or the laboratory director for microbiology has to be an MD in microbiology, or he could be an MSc or PhD in medical microbiology with more than 3 years relevant experience in a medical laboratory. But in case it is an MSc PhD person, it needs to be, the reports need to be co-signed by a medical doctor. So that's one of the most common NCs that we face. So all of you who want to put up your microbiology departments for accreditation, this is the number one, because who would be the lab director? Who would be the authorized signatory is the number one question that you would have in mind. And I hope the explanation there on the slide explains what kind of a qualification is required by law to be a lab director of a microbiology laboratory. Another common NC under personnel is there is no internal training mechanism for microbiology. Many laboratories who have put up their other departments like Hemat, Biochem prior for accreditation have a fairly good induction and training calendar for these other departments. Somehow microbiology is not on their radar. This despite the fact that a lot of staff is being cross-utilized in microbiology, that is by rotation, a person from Hemat or Biochem might be doing some amount of basic work in microbiology, but no proper internal training mechanism has been documented, and that is one of the most common NCs that we see. Another NC which we do very frequently come across is the housekeeping staff. They are unaware about spill handling. Sometimes they are even unaware about biomedical waste handling. And this is such an important part of the internal training that it cannot be skipped. The housekeeping staff do form an integral part of our quality management system as well, and they need to follow the protocols as well. Another common NC which we do find under personnel requirements are the anti-HBS titers for the lab staff, which are not done in many cases. The hepatitis B vaccination schedule, as we know, it's 0, 1, and 6. That is your first dose. If it's given today, 1 month hence would be the second dose, and 5 months after that, that is 6 months from now, would be the third dose. It is advisable that on the 7th month, you do your hepatitis B anti-HBs titers. These anti-HBs titers should be more than 10 MIU per ml for the titers to be seroprotective. There could be staff members who have taken vaccination in the past and who, before giving a booster to these staff members, it is again advisable to do an anti-HBs titer, and if it is more than 10 MIU per ml, then the booster can be avoided. COVID and flu vaccination, though optional, I think many of the many of the lab staff have already been vaccinated for COVID. In the West, flu vaccination is mandatory for lab staff, not so in India. At any given point of time, the people have the right to refuse vaccination, but if he or she does so, there has to be a written declaration of refusal, which has to be documented if the person so chooses to refuse vaccination. Under premises, one of the mandatory requirement of microbiology is the facility, a proper facility. There have been instances where the microbiology instruments, both the automated blood culture as well as the automated automated IDAST system, YTEC, has been put up in a common area, and no separate area for micro separated from other labs is a very, very common NC for first time oddities in microbiology. You need a BSL2 facility, that is, you need a minimum of a biosafety cabinet to go in for a microbiology accreditation process. Your microbiology laboratory cannot be a thoroughfare. There have been instances where the entrance to the hemat lab or the entrance to the biochemistry lab has been through the microbiology laboratory, and that is a strict no-no. Inadequate space for microbiology has also been one of our very common NCs. As you know, we are the poor cousins of pathology, not a revenue generator. So we are usually pushed in one corner of the laboratory, and we have to make do, or we have to work our way up from that corner. And this has been a very, very common NC. Segregation of TB, mycology, molecular biology, which requires more than a BSL2 facility. It requires a BSL3 facility if you're manipulating any cultures. So that needs to be kept in mind if you have TB or mycology on your scope of testing. Unidirectional process flow in molecular biology is absolutely mandatory. And except AFB smear, which can be done even on a BSL1 facility, the CBNAT or the TrueNAT requires a BSL2 facility to process. The laboratory, another common NC is on the space. The laboratory, one such laboratory had disposed of all its raw data pertaining to rapid card tests, citing lack of space. Now, if you look up the NABL 112, under control of records, you need to maintain all your records for microbiology for 1 year and for your infectious molecular markers for 2 years. But the guideline also gets a little confusing, wherein it says that raw data and LG charts need to be kept for 1 year or till the next audit, whichever is later. So mostly I advise people to just keep their data till the next audit. I mean, from the previous audit till the next audit, you just keep the data for 2 years, and that is that should suffice. Sometimes media pouring is done in the autoclave room itself. Now, here you would understand that these are two incompatible processes. Media pouring is it's a sterile process, whereas your autoclave could be of the unsterile samples. Media pouring needs to be done either in a separate area, or there is a certain kind of a process control that needs to be put in place. I understand that it's not always possible to put media pouring in a separate area, And if at all the laboratory has only one biosafety cabinet, just re-engineering your processes, like if you're doing media pouring at the beginning of the day, and only later getting in your clinical samples into the same biosafety cabinet, is acceptable, provided there is enough process of cleaning that is demonstrated prior to using the hood for your media pouring. Single autoclave being used for both sterile and unsterile loads is also a strict no-no. There is a clear mandate now in biomedical waste guidelines which talks about separating your sterile loads and your unsterile loads. So your unsterile autoclave cannot be used for anything else but disposal of your infectious waste. Another common NCs, simple one, no biohazard signages in the laboratory, and it's very easy to get over this particular non-conformances by putting up these relevant biohazard signages in different parts of the laboratory and also the different instrumentations. The swab or air settled plate is not done in the biosafety cabinet in microbiology laboratory. The guideline is minimum once a week you need to do this air settled plate testing or the swab testing within the biosafety cabinet to ensure that adequate cleaning has been done of the biosafety cabinet. Wipe test not done in molecular biology laboratory is also one of the common NCs. As you know, the wipe test is mandatory at least once monthly, wherein you can swab the different surfaces in the molecular biology lab and then immerse that particular swab in molecular grade water and use that as directly as a sample and see whether it's whether the target is amplified or not. Daily surface cleaning record not available is again a very common NC. 1% sodium hypochlorite prepared fresh is what is required. There have to be records of training of the housekeeping personnel for preparing this 1% sodium hypochlorite. Usually, commercially, what is available is around 4 to 5%, and it needs to be adequately diluted, 1 in 4 or 1 in 3, in order to achieve a 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. It needs to be prepared every day in the morning and then dispensed at all the laboratory benches and then discarded at the end of the day. Moving on to equipment and reagents. Another common NC is equipment not uniquely labeled. And every instrument, not just in microbiology, but all the equipment in the laboratory need to be uniquely labeled. There has to be mention of the calibration or the preventive maintenance status of the instrument on the label itself. What are the next due dates of calibration or maintenance? This unique ID should also reflect on the calibration and maintenance record and not just the serial number. So many a times when we cross-check our the instrument calibration records or the preventive maintenance record, it has no mention of this unique label which you have generated internally, whereas the calibration record which has been coming from a calibration laboratory usually has the serial number, but which is a good enough traceability of the instrument, but it would be advisable to also have that unique ID of your instrument on the label as well. Contact numbers of service engineers may be displayed on the side of the instrument. This is for junior staff. If they are working in late shift, they should know whom to contact in case of any breakdown. If you want to put up your laboratory for you want to include the mycology in the scope, you need to have a BOD incubator available. It is a requirement as per NABL 112 for fungal cultures. Sometimes the microscopes in the laboratory are unclean, they are not serviced as scheduled. A daily cleaning record of the microscope and at least once a year preventive maintenance, cleaning of the lenses is required for all microscopes. Moving on to other equipment and reagents, no preventive maintenance of ELISA reader. Typically, a self-test daily and a preventive maintenance has to be done once a year for all the ELISA readers. The PM record should carry the raw data of calibration and not just state that the instrument has been calibrated, but what kind of tests that were done during calibration has to be mentioned on the calibration certificate, along with, of course, the unique ID and the serial number of the instrument. Biosafety cabinets not calibrated once a year. Now, in microbiology, you need to have the biosafety cabinets, both class 2A2 and class 2B2. Class 2B2, of course, are the vented ones. They're vented outside through a HEPA filter, and those are used for specimen manipulations and culture manipulations in case of mycology and microbacteriology. Whereas your class 2A2 can take care of your media pouring as well as your processing your general bacterial isolates for your IDAST. Laminar flows, if at all in use, are not appropriate for microbiological, for medical microbiological work. They are, of course, used in many pharma microbiology because they are essentially sterile work. But in clinical laboratories, laminar flows are not really advisable. The cold centrifuge not achieving necessary RPM. Now, centrifuge again needs to be calibrated once a year. Centrifuges obviously cannot be physically moved for calibration. So someone with a calibrated tachometer needs to visit the laboratory and do the centrifuge calibration on site. And preferably the instrument should not be moved after that at all. If at all you happen to change the position of the equipment of the centrifuge, please understand that there could you need to recalibrate the equipment in the new position. Daily temperature record of incubator and fridge not available. Now, in absence of continuous monitoring, if your hospital or your laboratory has continuous monitoring of temperature of all equipment, well and good, it is remotely monitored and there could be an alarm system for it. But if you are doing it manually, then twice a day record is what is recommended. So maybe once in the morning and once in the evening, you can record the temperature both of the incubator as well as the refrigerator. Biological indicators not tested for autoclaves. It is advisable that chemical indicators need to go in with each load of autoclave that you run, and biological indicator should be run monthly. It is mandatory by law, if you look up the biomedical waste guidelines, that you need to maintain record of these indicators, the chemical indicators with each load and the biological indicators monthly. It needs to be maintained. Moving on to no IQ, OQ, PQ available for automated IDAST system. Now, IQ, OQ, PQ are the installation quotient, the operational quotient, and the performance quotient should be done for all patient testing. This method verification needs to be done, and it will be differing basis if you are moving from one automated MIC system to another, or if you are moving from a manual disk diffusion to an automated system, wherein you look for the concurrence of data. Close to 90% of concurrence is required before you can move from one system to another. The SOP for automated blood culture machine does not mention contingency in case of breakdown. Now, given the heavy capex that we have in microbiology for most of our equipment, it is just not possible for most laboratories to have a backup instrument for each and every equipment. But it would suffice to have your contingency plan in place. And the simple contingency plan would be to simply remove all the bottles which are in the machine, just remove them, put it into your incubator. But yes, now, since there is no continuous scanning of these bottles, you need to do frequent subculture in order to see what has grown. But this contingency plan needs to be mentioned in your SOP for automated blood culture. What would be your backup or the YTEC in case of breakdown? Now, many laboratories do tell us that once you have a breakdown of YTEC, you simply do the disk diffusion and give out the reports. Now, disk diffusion as an alternative to MIC is not acceptable. This difference in method should not be reported as per the DOS, because the clinician or the patient is asking you to do a test for MIC, and a report of this diffusion may not be acceptable. If at all you need to do that, then both manual as well as automated MIC method needs to be on your scope separately, and then you could move from one method to another, provided you are giving the appropriate information to the clinician or to the patient. The laboratory has only one set of pipettes. Now, this would be a major non-conformance. I think every laboratory needs to have a backup set of pipettes, well calibrated, and it would be unacceptable to have only one set of pipettes in the laboratory. Moving on to inventory management is inadequate. No evidence of first in, first out of reagent. Now, in a laboratory like microbiology, where you have a lot of manual or rather in-house prepared reagents, one look at the refrigerator wherein you are storing all your media can tell us a lot of things. What kind of, even though you have prepared this media in-house, you need to give an expiry date to this media. And generally, the expiry date of in-house prepared media is only about a week. There have been instances where the laboratories have labeled this media as with an expiry of 1 month, which is not acceptable. In 1 month, there would be nothing. The media would have been dehydrated by that time, and there would be nothing on the plate for you to plate on. The number of plates stacked in your refrigerator can also tell you a lot about inventory management. If your daily workload of let's say your urine samples is around 10 urine samples per day, and if you see around 50 plates or more than 100 plates of plate prepared in one go, you know that there's something wrong. That is, the technician is taking a shortcut, probably is preparing more media and go and trying to stack it up into the refrigerator. Now, this could cause multiple problems, as in your media that was prepared beforehand might stay back in your refrigerator, and the new lot of media that is prepared might come ahead and get used up while your plates at the back get dehydrated. And at the end of the day, it's useless, both for the laboratory to use as well as it's a cost to the management. ATCC organisms not available, QC organisms not being available for many tests is also one of the most frequent non-conformances. NABL 112 states that this ATCC organism can be procured from a standard source, a standard vendor, from a PT provider, or also from another NABL accredited laboratory. So if you have another NABL accredited laboratory in your city, you can simply ask them to give you an ATCC, give you a subculture of the ATCC organism. But do remember that only 2 passages of that ATCC, as in 2 subcultures of that ATCC organism, original ATCC vial, is appropriate for testing. And therefore, when they do give you that strain of ATCC, they need to mention on the certificate that they give you that this has not undergone more than 2 subcultures or more than 2 passages. Another common NC is your stains not being labeled properly. All reagent bottles need to have date of receipt, date of opening, and also date of expiry. Now, there could be an argument that most of your reagent bottles do have a date of expiry, but the date of expiry mentioned in the fine print sometimes could be missed by the technicians. In fact, it is missed very often by the technical staff. And if you have the date of expiry written on the label, staring at you in the face every time you are using that reagent bottle, it would help to keep prevent using these reagents after the expiry date. No UPS or backup refrigerator. Now, this would put serious questions on the reagent integrity, the process integrity, even on your operational continuity in case of a severe power shortage. in metro cities, I'm sure this is not much of a problem. But then, yes, in the smaller cities, in the smaller town, where power is a problem, you need to have all your equipment on appropriate UPS in order to maintain reagent integrity. Lot verifications of antibiotic tests not done. Now, it is advisable that every time a lot of antibiotic test changes, you need to do a continuous 30-day lot verification of those lists. And if 27 out of 30, that is 90% of these results are as prescribed by the CLSI guideline, then you can move to once a week testing of those QC strains with those antibiotic tests. However, this is different when you talk about lot verification of Vitek reagents, wherein because these are commercially acquired reagents, only when there is a lot change of the Vitek reagent, that is the time you need to do a lot verification and move on from one lot to another. Now, given the cumbersome nature of this lot verification process, I think it would be more prudent if your purchase guys are in constant touch with the and ensure that your lot doesn't change very frequently, and that should help you keep your costs in check. Moving on to the processes, the pre-analytical processes, the directory of services or your test menu not available at nursing stations in hospital laboratories, or not available at collection centers in many of the laboratories which have a chain of collection centers. Sorry. So your list of accredited and non-accredited tests has to be available for the users. Generally, microbiology and molecular biology are last to be included in the scope, and many a times your directory of services either completely overlooks the tests, the microbiology tests, or they are somewhere at the end of the menu where they are not listed very clearly as non-accredited, if at all they were not included in the scope in the first place. No specimen collection instructions for culture in the primary sample collection manual. Now, once again, since many labs go in first for hematology and biochemistry, your primary sample collection manual caters to those departments. And somehow when you put up microbiology as an additional scope, maybe in your subsequent audits, you somehow miss out adding those specimen instructions or rather specimen collection instructions into the primary sample collection manual. Type of specimen received for blood culture is also an issue sometimes. Few labs have been seen using heparin vials rather than blood culture bottles inoculated bedsides. There's a lot of debate on this, whether heparin can be used or cannot be used. The WHO guideline does mention about usage of heparin vials as well, though with proper validation. But the ideal process in blood culture is, of course, a bedside collection done by the nursing staff or by the RMO who has the access to the blood culture bottle at the patient bedside. For the laboratories who are sending out these blood culture bottles to different wards, to different ICUs, expiry of the bottle becomes an issue. Many a times these bottles simply don't come back to the laboratory, or they come back to the laboratory at the time of or very close to the expiry. They are returned saying that, okay, these are expired, can you give us the new ones? Now, of course, it's a cost to the laboratory to keep on replenishing these stocks of these blood culture bottles and having them expired on site. But if you do, there is a proper CLSI guideline on expired reagent usage, and you can extend the expiry provided you have done a proper validation on those bottles. Skin antisepsis methods for blood cultures, a proper communication or a proper training needs to be given to the nursing staff, to the collection staff, to the RMOs who might be collecting the blood samples in case of a hospital-based laboratory. And this cannot be ignored, because this will have a direct implication on the performance of that blood culture bottle. Another common concern, another pain area of many laboratories, that HIV consent form was not collected. The consent form has to be collected, and the NACO guideline clearly states that both pre and post-test counseling needs to be done. Now, it is easier said than done in private laboratories. In the institutional laboratory, of course, they have the ICPC where they have counsel and counsel each and every patient. It becomes a little difficult in hospital-based, rather in private laboratories, but you need to. But that's the law, and you need to abide by it. The consent form has to be collected in local language. That's the mandate. The transport boxes that are used to transport specimens either from the ward to the laboratory, or in case of a chain laboratory from the collection centers to the main lab. Many a time they do not have the biohazard signages. They do not have absorbent material inside. They don't have the relevant pool packs inside, and it is mandatory if specimen logistics is taking place between two centers. If at all the samples are being transported across different geographies, that is a distant testing laboratory is used, it is prudent to use transport media, especially borate containers for urine cultures or Stewart transport media for swabs. They need to be used. The test request form does not capture specimen collection date and time. Now, this is so important in microbiology culture processing, because there are many a times the samples may have been collected during the night if it's an hospital-based lab, and it's only later on during the day that the samples might be reaching the laboratory, or if at all the laboratory might be receiving the samples during the night, but they are not processed till in the morning when the microbiology person arrives. So your time of collection, date and time of collection is very, very necessary. Heparin whole blood is heparin is a known inhibitor of PCR, and if at all you do happen to receive a sample, heparinized whole blood, inadvertently collected from your wards and sent to the microbiology laboratory, it needs to be immediately flagged as a problem specimen. It needs to be discarded, and a fresh specimen needs to be asked for. Moving on to the analytical processes, the collection time and processing time not mentioned on raw data sheets. Now, why I'm harping so much about these collection times on the test request form, and then transcribed again on the raw data sheets used in the microbiology laboratory, because the time between your collection and processing may be far from ideal, especially if the laboratory is not a 24-hour lab and the samples might be arriving during the night. It will impact your culture plates or your results if at all your samples are being processed after a time gap, though they may be arriving in time in the laboratory. Time of loading, unloading vials from the backtech not recorded. Now, this is again important. If you know the time of sample collection, and if at all there is a delayed entry for distant samples, the sample has arrived from a laboratory or a center which is quite a distance away, then you have to be aware that sometimes the scanning log of the backtech instrument may not pick up a delayed entry vial, and it needs to be adequately looked at. Maybe macroscopically in case of a colorimetric method like Bacti alert, wherein you can actually see the color change of the indicator at the base of the vial, and you can directly put it up for a gram stain and a subculture into the instrument. Time to positivity can also help as an indicator if at all you're growing something like a coagulase negative staph, which could be a common skin contaminant. Your SOP for sputum specimen sometimes does not mention about adequacy on smear. And as we know that the Bartlett grading of sputum specimens is necessary to know whether your sputum sample has been adequate, whether your sputum sample is appropriate for testing or there has been a lot of salivary contamination in the sample, in which case you need to either ask for a repeat sample after giving proper instruction to the laboratory or at the collection point. Okay, and only with samples with a Bartlett grade of 1+ or more should be processed further, ideally, or they are good for interpretation when you are interpreting your culture feeds. HIV tests not reported as per NACO guidelines. That is, they are not reported as reactive, non-reactive, and sometimes you get an indeterminate result. That is, if you are getting your initial screening as positive, but your follow-up testing on 2 different methods is coming negative, you need to label this sample as indeterminate, and a prudent thing to do would be to ask for a repeat sample after about 2 to 3 weeks gap, by which it would be very clear whether the patient was in window period, and that's the reason why it is going up indeterminate, and at that point of time, after 2 to 3 weeks, it will be very clear, a clear negative or a clear positive. AFB slides are reused. Now, this is a health hazard for housekeeping staff, and as far as possible, these should be avoided. We all know that though the lab might argue that these were all AFB negative slides, we all know what is the sensitivity of your AFB smears. You need at least 10⁴ bacilli per ml of the sample for it to be seen on the slide. That means anything less is missed, and these slides which you are asking your housekeeping staff to clean could have been carrying acid-fast bacilli. Sometimes you get a pus AFB report, smear report with a grading. Now, the RNTCP grading for AFB smears, that is your 3+, 2+, 1+, and scanty, is essentially for sputum only and not for your extrapulmonary samples. So for all extrapulmonary samples, it is simply the report should say seen or not seen. No concentration done for stool oasis. Now, if you're reporting on stool oasis routinely as a part of your stool routine microscopy, it is advisable to do a saline concentration of stool samples. That should increase the yield of positivity. In your molecular biology laboratory, non-template control not being used in the PCR run puts a huge question mark on your PCR run validity. Sometimes in your serology lab, your kit inserts itself has been filed as SOPs. Yes, they are a good guide for your SOP, but your procedure and the data needs to be transcribed to fit the SOP format, which is mentioned in your quality management system, and it should not be just a copy-paste job of your kit insert. Moving on to quality assurance processes. Control of antibiotic risk not as per standard guideline, as I did mention previously in my talk. Every week you need to test your antibiotics at least to the 3 common ATCC, E. coli, Pseudomonas, and Staph. But before moving on to this weekly testing, every time a lot changes, you need to do a 30-day validation. And if 90%, that is 27 out of these 30 readings, are within limits as per the CMSI guidelines, only then can you move to the once a week testing for your ATCC. QC data unavailable for a few antibiotics. Now, this very often happens in when you have Vitek in your laboratory, but the clinician demands certain add-on antibiotics that he wants to test something that is beyond the Vitek panel, and inadvertently you test these antibiotics, you put them on the report, but during the audit it may be pointed out that these antibiotics done by disc diffusion with no clearly written method on your report, it would invite a non-conformance. So if at all you're doing that, you should have both the methods on your scope, both the Vitek as well as your manual method should be on the scope of testing. Quality indicators not available for microbiology. I think quality indicators is it can be a topic by itself. You need to have quality indicators at any given point of time in the microbiology lab, and they should be covering pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical areas of the laboratory. Now, moving on to something which is very, very common, that is QC for for stained smears was done only at lot change. That is only when you receive a new gram stain lot from your vendor. That is the time you were doing the QC, this particular laboratory. But we have to understand that QC of gram stain or ZN stain is a process control mechanism. It should ideally be done with every batch of staining, but then if you do it with every batch of staining, though it is acceptable as per norm, an ideal thing would be to do with every slide. That is what we used to do, if at all, and you could do, provided you have the resources and the time. That is, you can prepare slides with a gram positive and a gram negative organisms at two ends of the slide, and leave the space in between center portion of the slide, wherein you can do the test smear, the sample smear, and then what will happen is that every time you stain the slide, it is like an inbuilt QC, wherein you can see your gram positive, gram negatives. If they are proper, then you move on to screen your smear. QC for media performed only once a month. Now, again, a media QC is a process control that needs to be done. So media QCs, whether you are preparing culture media or you are preparing biochemical media, they have to be done with every batch of media that is prepared. You need to do two things. One, you need to check for sterility, and second, you need to check for growth of the appropriate ATCC strain. The frequency of media preparation again should be in line with the number of specimens tested. So when we open the inventory refrigerator, if you see a certain type of media prepared in excess of what is required or in line with your specimen accession, that is, you very few samples, but a large number of media plates being poured and prepared in the laboratory could invite more scrutiny of your inventory control mechanisms. ECAS PT does not cover all tests under the scope. Now, by the standard, as per the standard, all tests under scope must be covered under ECAS PT, and if they are not covered under your external quality assurance schemes, you need to have a backup interlaboratory comparison method as well. Now, these alternate methods are acceptable only if there is non-availability of a formal ECAS PT, or the analyte to be measured is unstable. For example, if you have to send a CD4 interlaboratory comparison from one town to another, there is bound to be some variation, and then it's an interlaboratory comparison may not be practical. And in such cases, even a replicate testing or a split sample testing within the laboratory can be done for such analytes. Exchange of samples with other accredited laboratories for interlaboratory comparison. One laboratory has to serve as a reference against which the other is compared, and this which of these laboratories, the laboratory with whom you are sharing the samples, which of these will serve as a reference laboratory, it has to be documented in the MOU itself. Moving on to post-analytical processes, samples stored at room temperature after testing. If a separate refrigerator is unavailable, you can store in closed plastic box in your existing refrigerators as well. It is an acceptable method. If at all there is a lack of space for a new refrigerator, as well as lack of capital expense that you need to do for if the number of tests isn't enough. But at least these unsterile specimens need to be stored in closed plastic boxes, maybe at the base of the refrigerator, is an acceptable practice. Samples for cultures discarded after plating. The SOP mentions a 3-day guideline, but they are discarded immediately after processing. So just in case you need to reprocess the sample for whatever reason, you wouldn't have the sample available. What we do follow in our laboratory is we simply have a day-wise discard. That is, we have a discard tray for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So every Monday, the previous Monday's samples would get discarded, and you would put that Monday's samples in that Monday tray. So it saves you a lot of trouble of looking up the dates every time before discarding. It's easier for the technical staff to follow as well. The laboratory collects biomedical waste from all its collection centers in the city and brings them to a central laboratory location from where it is discarded. Now, this is again a strict no-no. If at all the biker who's carrying this waste from a collection center to the main laboratory, what if he meets with an accident and you have all your samples strewn across the road? Now, it is mandatory that every healthcare unit, and so your collection center is also a healthcare unit, it needs to be registered separately with your biomedical waste contractor. And only this biomedical waste contractor is allowed to transport biomedical waste in a specified van or a specified vehicle, and people like cannot be transporting biomedical waste across the city. Many times improper segregation of biomedical waste is noted, and when we question the laboratory staff, they are unable to say what kind of waste goes in which kind of bin. There is an excellent pictorial guide which is available. I have put up that the link on the screen itself from the Central Pollution Control Board. Maybe you could download this link, and it's both in English as well as Hindi, and it is a good guide to be put up on the walls for your grade 3, grade 4 workers as well to understand what waste goes into which container. Another NC which we see very commonly is that the laboratory does not autoclave the microbiology waste prior to handover to biomedical waste container contractor. Now, this is mandatory. On-site autoclaving of all infectious waste is mandatory now. And I think post-COVID, there has been an amendment to these biomedical waste rule, and it is now an absolute necessity to autoclave all infectious waste on the site before handing it over to the biomedical waste contractor. And when the biomedical waste contractor goes ahead and does an autoclaving later, it's a double autoclaving mechanism that is put in place. Fluids like urine, body fluids, and effluents from your analyzers, they can be treated with 1% hypochlorite and flushed down the drain. This is an acceptable practice. RNA elutes in your molecular biology is stored at -20 degrees instead of the mandatory -80 degrees. The -80 degree refrigerator is now a mandatory requirement, and all the laboratories who went in for their molecular biology enable accreditation for molecular biology, especially during the COVID, must have purchased this -80 degrees Celsius refrigerator. Malvio benches not cleaned with 10% hypochlorite. So freshly prepared 10% sodium hypochlorite solution, followed by rinsing with a 70% alcohol or cleaning with commercially viable DNA destroying decontamination products can be used. Ideally, you can also have a UV light in the molecular area. So just like your FNEC rooms, which you would want to sterilize, or your CSSD, which would have an UV light, you can have an UV light in your molecular laboratory also, which can be put on at the end of the day when no human traffic is expected in that part of the laboratory. Moving on to report formats, there was this lab wherein the ELISA kit was exhausted, so they performed the HIV test on card. Now here there is a mismatch between the method mentioned in the directory of service and what has been mentioned on the report. Now, if at all you're doing this, that is, if at all you're, you only have ELISA on the scope, and then if you are testing it by card, then it is out of scope of testing. Both the methods should be a part of your scope if at all you're reporting only by the card method. Final report of TB culture does not indicate whether it's a typical or atypical, that is, whether it's a Mycobacterium tuberculosis complex or it's a non-tuberculous mycobacteria. Now, this is a standard practice for all TB culture report to bear whether it's a typical or an atypical isolate that you have grown, because your treatment would differ and you would want the doctor to appropriate treatment as quickly as possible. If at all you happen to indicate that the isolate is a non-tuberculous mycobacteria. Another very, very common NC that we see is formatting errors on your software. Most of these softwares are not suitable for microbiology. Most analyzed HIS. They are designed for the bread and butter segments of the laboratory, like your hemat and biochem, whereas microbiology, which has very few less sample load, usually these are not designed, and text-based reports, they need to be legible to the clinician. Sometimes you see those reports in just 3 or 4 words in a column, in which normally you would get a quantitative value of hematology or biochemistry, and they're just very, very difficult to read. The scope says that the test method is automated ID-AST, but a manual AST was reported. Now, brings us back to the question that what would you do in case of a breakdown of Whiting? With the breakdown of an automated blood culture system, it was easy because you could simply remove the wires, put it in the incubator, and do a serial subculture, do a frequent subculture, and see whether it's positive or not. And as long as the contingency plan is mentioned in your blood culture SOP, everything was fine. But here the method itself changes. Now, once the method changes, the either due to breakdown or maybe, as we mentioned earlier, additional antibiotics apart from Whiting card that have been used. If the manual AST is not a part of your scope, then you will simply have to outsource it to a local NABL laboratory in order to maintain the sanctity of the report that it's meant, that is, you're reporting out what has been mentioned in the scope. Out of scope tests reported with the NABL logo. Now, this classically happens with something like anaerobic cultures, which you might not be doing in your laboratory, but might be sending it out. But inadvertently, you are reporting out these anaerobic cultures on the same stationery on which your other microbiology tests are going. And if they are going with an NABL logo, though not being in scope, this can become a serious non-conformance. Critical call-out policy followed but not documented. Blood culture positives reported but not recorded. Again, very simple things about recording your critical call-outs. Whom did you report it to? And is also very critical. And so who has reported and whom did you report it to needs to be a part of your critical call-out. Another important thing about notifiable diseases, that we all know that TB now is a notifiable disease. Dengue and H1N1, of course, apart from many others which are notifiable. What we have started doing is that we are putting the Nikshay number once you register a positive patient on the Nikshay software. We have started putting the Nikshay number on all our TB positive reports, so that anyone who sees this report, any healthcare worker who sees that report, can check that Nikshay number and would know the entire history of treatment of that patient once he logs on to the Nikshay software with that Nikshay number. Moving on to lab software, the biochemistry staff could access and could inadvertently edit microbiology report. Now, it is advisable to have department-wise access control to the software, wherein only the relevant staff who are trained and who can interpret particular set of tests, only those can access entering the data for related to those tests itself. Reports of patients are archived only for 3 months and are unavailable thereafter. So your software backup at regular intervals, there has to be a clear policy that needs to be defined how often the software backup is done and where is this software backup stored both on-site and off-site. So the policy needs to clearly state that. So challenges in QC in microbiology, plenty of challenges. The biggest challenge, I think, is the cost-benefit ratio. You would wonder whether you want to do this if at all your your microbiology and molecular loads are less. But nevertheless, to summarize, it is not so daunting a task. If you get your basic right, if you asking the right questions to yourself, it's not so difficult to put up your micromolecular and zero for your NABL accreditation. But if you're still finding daunting tasks, you could consider starting with an NABL certification. This generally NABL certification, it's also valid for 2 years. So you can start with an NABL certification and then stepwise, once you're more confident, you can move your laboratory to your more stringent accreditation norms. So I hope I've given you in a nutshell what would be required as basics of QC in in microbiology. Touched a little bit upon serology and molecular as well. I'll be happy to answer your queries. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your patience.
Dr. Shirish. I must say this has been one of the best microbiology webinars I have attended till date. So it was really, and so well presented, especially what the main thing about, the relevant thing about the webinar was that you presented all those things which are of practical implication, relevance, like the non-conformants in microbiology lab. Like I came to know more about microbiology when I worked as COVID lab coordinator in this medical college, and I'm still the coordinator in this medical college, and I'm still the coordinator here for the all this work, and did all NABL accreditation, of course, with my close friend, the HOD of microbiology here. And one thing, just to comment, microbiology is not a poor cousin of pathology. It's the first closest cousin of pathology. So we go hand in hand, and of course we know all tests, let it be urine routine microscopy, if we see pus cells, the first thing is send the sample for culture. So it's so much relevant in like patient care, for maintaining healthcare, excellence in healthcare. So it is a very, very important subject, not just theoretically, clinically, and in all aspects. So thank you so much. There are a few questions in the chat box still pouring in, so would like to start with that. And before we take up a few questions, first of all, there's this question by Dr. Janvi Burman, like how to discard culture plates, media separately and Petri dishes separately, and used media to be autoclaved and handed over to BMW treatment facility. And lastly, she or he wants to know, does Petri dish need to be discarded into red bags without autoclaving as it is plastic? So should I repeat?
Yeah, I think I get the question. If at all you are not reusing your Petri plates, there are a lot of laboratories who do reuse. Obviously, for commercial reasons, they are reusing the Petri plates. So they are scraping out the media and then cleaning out those Petri plates, and then autoclaving it and then reusing it. I would seriously question the cost-benefit analysis of doing that entire activity. You're putting your entire staff's, the housekeeping staff, at risk of various infections. But your plates, as such, the entire plate needs to be discarded in the yellow bag, not in the red bag, for the simple reason that in your red bag you would put in your infected plastics. Yes, the Petri plate is a plastic, but remember, it also has your bacterial colonies, and that is the reason why it should go directly into your yellow bags.
Dr. Vijay Mohan wants to know how to maintain quality control or any NABL data paperless.
If you have your good LIS system, you can maintain them. It's not that you cannot have your NABL data without a paper. Definitely you can. But you need to have all your stringent, firewalls for your documents that you store in your LIS system, and accessibility given to people authorized, etc. So you need to have it very stringent system when you have a LIS. That's good enough, I guess.
Okay. So that means a strong LIS system
Yeah, you need to have.
necessary. Yeah.
It is okay to have paperless, and it's
Not
good to
just
have
for
paperless also.
microbiology, for everything, for our hospital also, we have this
Totally,
HMS.
totally.
And then today's time, this is required because all patients, not just patients, doctors, they want reports just online and at the quickest turnaround time, which is
That's
so
right.
important in today's time. Yeah, Dr.
That's right.
Shirish, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. There was some problem at my end.
No, it's okay. That is one of the things that can
Yeah.
always happen.
So excellent talk, Dr. Shirish, and it was wonderful listening to you. And you covered almost all aspects of the quality control, as well as the routine functioning of the laboratory, and all those critical points where most of the time we have, queries, and most people would ask queries on in microbiology aspect of testing in the laboratory as well. It was wonderful. And in your absence, I just took one of your questions. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Sure.
is Professor in Head, Dr. JJ, we call her fondly as Dr. JJ. Could you please tell your medical college? She's Professor in Head of Microbiology at?
Yeah, at KMCH Medical College, Coimbatore. Thank you so much.
Yes. So back to the question round. So this is by Dr. Murugan Nandgopal. HIV PCR qualitative report is positive. So do we need to confirm this HIV status with serological method or Western blot if it's a fresh suspected case before releasing the report? Please suggest. I think you had mentioned about HIV in your this PowerPoint presentation also, but they want to know about this. Like if it's positive on PCR.
So while HIV PCR is being used very often, for initial screening of the patient, as per the norms, and it needs to fit into the NACO algorithm. Now, in the NACO algorithm, it's very clearly stated that it's an antibody-based test that needs to be done, or a combi test of an antigen antibody can be used as an initial screening test. And if at all you get any indeterminate test at the end of it, you need to test with a Western blot. But your PCR does not figure in this diagnostic algorithm of of labeling a person as HIV. So yes, you still need to do, and though it is an indication that the person will turn antibody positive, but you still need to confirm it with a Western blot before giving it out as positive.
So there is another question in the question and answer box. What is the minimum quality assurance program for labs seeking NABH MLP certification having microbiology in scope, or entry-level certification with less workload? So minimum quality assurance program.
Okay, I'll take the second part of the question first. That is for your entry level. Microbiology is not eligible for the entry level NABL certification. It's only for accreditation under NABL. As far as the NABH is concerned, it is the similar ECAS programs like CMC Vellore, or maybe for your RML ECAS, which can be used, or even the AIMS IAMM program can be used for as an ECAS program for your certification as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And Dr. Shalmali wants to know too, how many labs do we have to send ILC, inter-lab comparison sample, when external quality assurance is not available?
Okay. If at all the external quality assurance is not available, it again depends on the quantum of work, that is how many samples are you testing in absence of an proper EQUAS PT program. That is, it is as per these standard, it suffices, or as per the enable 112 as well, it suffices to test it with one additional one more laboratory for doing an inter-laboratory comparison is good enough. But if at all you are doing testing more, you can either increase the frequency of testing with that inter-laboratory, with that one laboratory, or you can send it to multiple laboratories as well. Any which ways, you need to decide prior in your MOU whether which of the laboratories will be your reference laboratory. So that reference should be used as if that reference laboratory says that your result is incorrect, it is incorrect. If it says it's correct, it's correct. So it might be differing with a different laboratory.
Another question by Dr. Ambi, clinically oriented. Who can do counseling for HIV testing? Can all clinicians do counseling before sending patients for HIV testing?
Yeah, see, the government institutions have the comfort of having a counselor being appointed with your ICTC networks. But for all the private laboratories, an MBBS and above, an MBBS doctor can become a counselor. So having an MBBS person talking to the patient, or rather counseling the patient, is good enough. The only thing is it needs to be documented on the consent form.
Thank you. There are a lot of thank you comments pouring in about the wonderful, amazing session. And now over to the next question by Dr. Anuradha Deshmukh. Is it must to change the ATC strain once it gets expired, or can we continue with QC if the QC reports are okay? Okay.
This is a pain point for many microbiologists because these APCC strains are costly, and it's a pain to maintain them. It's a pain to procure them, because how do you justify the cost to your management of these are prohibitively costly. So what we do is that when you procure these ATCC strain, one, because NABL does accept a purchase of an ATCC strain or a transfer of an ATCC strain from another NABL accredited laboratory. When we used to procure these ATCC strains, we used to keep one. They come these cultures, lyophilized cultures. They come in pairs. One vial we used to keep it inside in the -80, not touch it at all. The second one, we used to do a subculture, and from this subculture we used to prepare 52 different vials. So this 52 vials would suffice for 52 weeks. That is, you remove one vial every week and do a subculture, and the other vial you remove after a year, after 52 weeks, and then test it for another 1 year. So your requirement for ATCC that way can go up to can be catered to for up to 2 years. But if your ATCC strain at the time of opening has already been expired, then you cannot use it further. So you still need to maintain that if it's expired, it cannot be used. And while you're using it, it cannot undergo more than 2 subcultures. More than 2 passages, it loses its biochemical profile, and it cannot be used further.
So the next question is a little lengthy one. Dr. Monsumi wants to know, should we put biological indicator monthly or weekly? And the second part of this question is, should we also put biological indicator for the autoclave used for media preparation? Because in that case, we run the autoclave for 15 to 20 minutes, which is sometimes not sufficient to get a satisfactory result. Moreover, also checking the media for sterility check and growth check.
Right. Precisely. So the need to put a biological indicator in an autoclave. One, it is a process control, whether your autoclave is functioning properly or not. But if you look at the whether it is mandated by law or not, it is only mandated for your unsterile autoclave. So yes, you may use it for, you may choose not to use it for your sterile autoclave, that is in which you are preparing your media. But yes, of course, it needs to be backed up with an appropriate QC, which talks about when the media was incubated uninoculated into the incubator, it still had no growth of organisms. So that would demonstrate sterility of the media and therefore the performance of the autoclave. But yes, for your unsterile, it is a mandatory requirement.
Now, another question by Dr. Pandya Rajan. Is there any alternative way for ECAS, molecular infectious disease, when this ECAS is not available?
Okay. So wherever the ECAS is not available, a known positive, procured from an accredited laboratory is an acceptable method or acceptable positive control that you can use. So you can use these. Of course, you can use ATCC strains if it as a target, as a positive control. You can use a known positive strain, which is tested from any other accredited laboratory. You are procuring those samples and testing it. Even that is acceptable.
Okay. So now Dr. Janvi has another question. In ECAS, sometimes gram stain is sent, sometimes ZN stain or serology test they are sent. So shall we go for ILC every 6 months for all those tests along with ECAS from CMC Vellore?
This means I would stick my neck out here and say that the RML Lucknow is a much more structured program for microbiology and serology than the CMC Vellore program, wherein there is every survey that you get a monthly survey for microbiology and serology, and every time you have a gram stain, a Zeal-Nielsen stain, you have two cultures procured from two different samples, rather two different sites, and you have two serological assays as well. And this is by default every month that you're getting. So it's a much more structured program, and I am more comfortable in my laboratory doing the RML survey. You don't have to follow up for samples for the surveys as well. You don't have to follow up for the results as well. They come in, as clockwork. They would arrive. Your results would arrive in your inbox, and you would know exactly what to do with your results. So I'm more comfortable with the RML survey than
Now something related to the medical college. Dr. Sajid wants to know, many medical colleges, postgraduate students, these PG residents, they are a ground-based working staff in labs, but they are not a part of accreditation system. So what do you suggest that during the accreditation system, like should they continue their routine work, or have to sit aside till the inspection is complete?
If now this is something that is going against the essence of the audit process itself, because if the residents are doing the actual work on a non-audit day, they should be doing it on the audit days as well. So they should be the people. I mean, of course, you have laboratory technicians as well who are on your staff role. But if certain activities are being done by the residents, you should be doing them on the audit days as well. It is just that the residents cannot be shown as authorized signatories, but as people who are working at the bench, it's perfectly fine if you show them on the rules.
Yes, I would like to add that all our residents are the budding diagnostic physicians, budding microbiologists, budding pathologists. So they should be fully involved in day-to-day activities. So on the day of the inspection, they also do their bit that day also. Dr. Disha Sharma wants to know which all ATCC strains are must to be tested as per NABL requirement for Vitek and disk diffusion methods.
See, NABL doesn't mandate any usage of any particular ATCC strains. It is the CLSI guideline which should be followed. So the CLSI guideline clearly states those certain numbers for E. coli, staph, and Pseudomonas, which needs to be tested for the disk diffusion method. And for Vitek is the Vitek product insert, which very clearly states what ATCC strains need to be used. So every time there is a lot verification that you need to do for Vitek, you need to do it with those ATCC strains. But like I mentioned in my presentation as well, it would be easy, it would be more prudent for your purchase guys to catch hold of your Vitek distributor and ensure that your lots don't change very often, so that you don't incur a cost of doing that lot verification every now and then. So it's the CLSI mandate which ATCC to be used, not NABL. NABL would simply follow the CLSI guide.
Now, Dr. Ruchi Sachdeva would like to know, can we do split sampling instead of ILC for routine check of staining and KOH mount? Can we do split sampling?
So the guideline of or the standard clearly says that wherever an ECAS program is available, you should go in for an ECAS program. If the ECAS program is not available due to any reason, then if the next best is your inter-laboratory comparison. But if there are no laboratories in your vicinity which are doing that particular test, it's only then you can move to a split testing. So it's a cascade that you need to follow. So you cannot skip, if at all you don't have an ECAS, you cannot straight away go to a split testing. Inter-laboratory comparison is your intermediate step. If it is not possible or not available, only then you can move to a split testing.
Okay, thank you. Still many questions, like a rapid fire round. So next question by Dr. Pratiksha Rao. After autoclave or sterilization plates, direct poured media in plates or dry for hot air oven, then poured media. So I really didn't understand this. Maybe you could understand.
I presume that she's talking about glass Petri plates. Yes, they need to be put through an hot air oven before you can use them for pouring the media.
A question by I think it's more questions in the question and answer chat box. Can we do media preparation and discarding in the same autoclave? Autoclave media plates to be discarded in yellow bags. So
I think we answered both of them.
This was done already.
So
There's another
media,
one. Yeah. What do you mean by medical doctor? Can a MD pathology person act as co-signatory when a MSc PhD person is also hired in the lab?
Yes, as per the CLIA guideline, the Clinical Establishment Guideline 2008, not just a medical, not just an MD path. They have, in fact, even an MBBS doctor can co-sign. This is needed basically wherever you need an interpretative aspect of the report. You need it co-signed by an MBBS and above. So even an MD pathology will work.
This question was by Dr. Manoj Kamar. Now by Dr. Gargi Bhattacharya, what to do or how to report with low anti-HCV values, 10 or less in ECLIA method?
Can I get the question again, please?
What to do or how to report with low anti-HCV values, 10 or less by ECLIA method?
Okay. So the ECLIA method is an extremely sensitive method. In fact, it does throw up a lot of borderline positives, on anti-HCVs, and it is always prudent to confirm it, with a fresh sample and an alternate technique. In this case, it's the blot that is anti-HCV blot that is being used to confirm. So a low positive E-CLIA anti-HCV or salt. So you need to retest before giving it out as well.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Gitanjali wants to know, does ILC require the same equipment or method? That's what she's wants to.
Yes. ILC has to be done on the same method, okay, and preferably the same equipment if it's available within the city. So that's how that ILC should be done.
And Dr. Nupur Shah wants to know, MSDS shall be placed at which areas of the lab?
See, MSDS basically are required for all your chemicals in the laboratory. So every chemical, for that matter, every your gram stain, all the stains which are included in the gram stain are also chemicals, and you have MSDS which are available from the vendor for all these chemicals. And these MSDS need not be displayed on the wall, but yes, you need to maintain them in a file, easily retrievable in case there is any accident. So yes, the MSDS has to be maintained in the laboratory.
So these were the main questions which were addressed. Dr. Reema Bahari, you had written, like, if you could speak for a while, you can please take on. Dr. Reema Bahari.
Hello, Dr. Reema.
Thank you, Dr. Preeti. It's really nice to see Dr. Shirish today. I just joined towards the end, but I was happy to hear my question put up there. And so regarding that, first of all, I want to congratulate Gaho, LabCon, Diagnostic Series for wonderful sessions, and Dr. Shirish for such a wonderful talk, and especially, you know, the lovely QA coming and a lot of general kind of queries and a very good topic. So thank you. Dr. Shirish, I wanted to clarify and ask you one point actually, because I do MLP assessments for NABH, and I have seen labs doing microbiology having, you know, the test. So there's nothing like they are not eligible for scope. So you made a statement that they are not eligible for scope. So they do have that in their scope, but they are not doing anything. And so, I mean, what is the minimum, you know, quality control I mean, assurance program they should have? Like you have clarified during the Q&A, some of the, I got the answers, the cascade of the EQUAS proficiency testing, what they should follow, but what minimum can they follow for internal quality assurance or something like that? Comment, please.
Yeah, I do understand that by the virtue of being in an NABH hospital, the laboratory automatically becomes you know, NABH certified or whatever. But I think it does not.
Yeah, Doctor, there is an independent MLP medical. This is an entry-level independent lab certification program for labs. They are irrespective of being part of the hospital.
Right. So I would the requirements for ECAS are similar, whether it's a certification or an accreditation. Okay, so even for a certification, you need to undergo whether it's your RML or whether it's your CMC or program, you need to go through that ECAS program. You need to maintain records of all your results of your ECAS PT. Any outlier, you still need to address it the way you would address for your full accreditation as well. The only difference between a NABH certification and NABH accreditation is the technical competence testing, which is not really happening with the certification, but it does happen in your full accreditation process. So technically, yes, you are almost doing everything that you would do for an accreditation. But yes, just because there is no testing and retesting the way it happens with your full accreditation process, it's a certification and it's not an accreditation. And of course, it's cramped in a half-day program, so you get rid of your auditor as quickly as possible from your laboratory.
Sorry, I missed to hear internal quality assurance, what they can follow minimum.
So for all microbiology tests, you can begin with the staining. You have your gram positive, gram negative controls for your staining. You have your acid fast bacilli for your Zeal-Nielsen staining. You have your media QC with your ATCCs. So even for your routine testing, you need to have those strains, because that is the process. Means if despite whether it's a certification or accreditation, you are still following the CLSI guidelines, and you are following the American Society of Microbiology guidelines in this particular case, which clearly mandates that for media, what QC you need to be doing, and those media QCs you need to test for sterility, and you need to test for the growth of a particular organism, a particular ATCC. But yes, in absence of an ATCC, just a known positive isolate procured from any other laboratory is also good enough to test.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because when I for assessments, I see that they are doing nothing. They do not have a documented quality assurance program, and they do nothing. So, at least they have to have some lab design minimum. So thank you for sharing this. Yeah.
So, Dr. Shirish, back to the questions. Like, there are a few more questions.
Sure.
Dr. Yushmin Thomas wants to know, storage of every chemical and acid should be kept below the waste level. Is that so?
Rather, I would put this as storage of all chemicals need to be one in an area where it is, I mean, especially if it's a flammable, it needs to be kept in a metal container. So your old Godrej cupboards, metal cupboards which are available would serve very well to keep your, inflammable reagents. The reason why they are kept at below waste level or below table level is that in order to minimize any accidents. That if at all there is any any bottle that slips from your hand, the spread of the acid or spread of that chemical to a wide area is avoided. So that's the reason why it should be kept. So it's more of a practical reason rather than any guideline which says that you should store it below waste level.
And another question by Shri Durga Balaji, how to do calibration for a fluorescent microscope? Radha, I would also like to know this.
Okay. Like with any other microscope, it's the daily cleaning. It is the preventive maintenance from the vendor, wherein he does the realignment of all your objectives and cleans the filters. That is what is done. It needs to be done minimum once in a year, like for any other microscope. So there is no specific guideline for fluorescence microscope as such. But it down to the at the end of the who's looking into the microscope. He needs to be trained enough to report on fluorescence slides. So the guidelines as far as cleaning, maintaining the microscope remain the same as with your light microscope, but training needs to be more extensive for the person who is screening on the fluorescence microscope.
Dr. Archana wants to know, should we send the gram stain slides for ILC for staining quality? Gram stain slides.
You can do that, but what the bare minimum that you need to do is your IQC, and your IQC can be done by testing your known gram positive, gram negative with every batch of staining. As far as whether to send it for ILC, again, the guideline is very clear. If there is an ICAS program available, it needs to go through ICAS. If ICAS is not available, it needs to go to an ILC. If ILC is also not available or not possible, it can go in.
A lot of congratulatory and thank you messages from everyone, not just from the attendees, but also from the panelists also, and the CAHO core committee members also. So really good session. So over to you, Dr. Santwana.
Thank you so much, Dr. Preeti. And thank you so much, Dr. Shirish Malvankar. In fact, the entire CAHO team, and especially the CAHO Diagnostic Division, would like to express a sincere gratitude for your really valuable talk on this particular CDE session, which was number 16, and on microbiology. the entire information from the time I have joined, and sorry, I was in an assessment, this was all invaluable. And like now we are receiving a numerous positive response. I'm sure all the participants have benefited from this session, and we are looking forward to, you are now a part of the Kaho family, and we are looking forward to be with you and share more and more insights in the near future. And just for the information of all the participants over here, this entire recording is going to be uploaded shortly on the Kaho website. In the resources information that we have a separate site for it on the kaho.in website. You all can go and you all can go through the entire presentation. It would be available shortly. So we need not worry about giving the PPT to anyone. They can always view it a number of times. And with this, I take this opportunity to thank our President, Dr. Vijay Agarwal, our Secretary General, Dr. Lalu Joseph. They have been guiding us throughout for the last 6-7 years that I have been with Kaho. They have always motivated us, especially to start with this diagnostic division and to spread the knowledge in this particular field of laboratory, as well as into radiology and sonology, all those divisions as well. And of course, the entire discussion would not get over without thanking Dr. Seema Bhargav, who is our chairperson, and our dashing and dynamic, and you can say the one who is the sole pillar, we can say, of our Kaho diagnostic division, Dr. Aparna Bhargav, and of course, Dr. Zubair Hassan, who has been my source of inspiration to get the CDE session back into active mode. And he has been helping me out, or actually I'm helping him out with giving all the information, gathering the best of the speakers from throughout the country, talking to them. And we started our new session back with you, Dr. Shirish, and this has been a mega hit. Thank you so much. And just for the information of all the participants, we'll be conducting such topics and webinars every month on the second Friday. And it's going to be the same between 4 to 6 p.m. And all these recordings would be available for the current series as well as the future series as well, and all the 15 series that have taken place in the past. And our next topic is going to be for the blood banks, now retermed as blood centers, understanding blood components and their clinical use. The entire calendar for the year of 2023 and 24 shall be uploaded on the Kaho website for all of you all to see and gather the people from your various laboratories, hospitals, or the diagnostic divisions. And 17th July, we all look forward to meet you all. And once again, Dr. Shirish, at a very short notice, you have been with us and sharing all the information that you had. Thank you so much. Thanks to the entire panelist team. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
It's been an absolute pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Kaho, for having me on this.
Thank you. And of course, the most important person, our anchor for today, Dr. Preeti Bajaj. Thank you, Dr. Preeti. Though you said that microbiology was not your topic, but you have done an excellent job. Thank you. Thank you so much. So looking forward to see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you.